Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 13 of our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, and it's adapted by Walter B. Gibson. And as always, we're going to go over the copyright information, which will be on your screen right now. It clearly says Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone, and copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited, copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, all rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company, a Random House company. It gives the address. This book was previously published as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited. Printed and bound in the United States of America, Library of Congress. Information is here if you're interested in that and the different publishings. Now, in the last part, there were several men that they heard the phantom footprints of suits of armor. And some of them saw ghosts. And we're going to continue from there. Let's go. Viewed at that hour, the castle was at its best. The sunlight was not strong enough to reveal the tumble-down segments of the battlement, nor the rusted chains of the drawbridge, which itself was in need of repair. Nor did the modern additions of 7 towers show their lack of paint. Indeed, it was difficult to tell the old from the new, except for the deep-set windows, one of which marked the room in which Helene Lowland slept. There, the quiet that lay over 7 towers seemed to pervade the room itself. Ordinarily, Helene could sleep until noon in such hushed surroundings. But today she was awakened suddenly by an odd clatter that developed into a sharp hammering and heavy pounding. As Helene started to spring from her bed, she was momentarily startled by threatening figures in the half-light. Then she gave a laugh of relief. Those looming shapes receded into the proper perspective as Helene blinked and rubbed her eyes. They were simply the ornate chairs, tables, and other bulky furnishings that gave all these old rooms a somewhat haunted look. But that did not explain the racket that had awakened Helene and was now continuing outside her door. Obviously, a crew of carpenters was at work, for Helene could hear the clatter of dropped boards, the rasp of saws cutting lengths of wood with hammers, keeping up a noisy obligato as the boards were nailed in place, and each pause in sawing or when a sharp stroke of the hammer told that the final nail had been driven home. Voices rose in raucous laughter. "Here's another for old Beardy," came a rough, thick tone. "Make haste now. We need 5 more of these." A saw sped its pace to a swift whine. A splintering sound told that another board had been cut. In confirmation, a voice announced, "Aye, and here is another. And that makes number 9. Hammers and saws were both at work now, rapidly finishing their task, which, from the sound, indicated that they were constructing a crude flight of stairs. "There's 10, and 11, and 12. Hands pressed to her throbbing temples, Helene wondered whether it was the late party, the early awakening, or just this incessant sawing and hammering that was giving her a splitting headache. Then, as voices broke into loud, jeering laughter with the chorus, "There's 13 for old Beardy," Helene could stand it no longer. She sprang from the old-fashioned bed, found her dressing gown, and wrapped it about her, and she picked a zigzag course among the furniture until she reached the door. There she drew back the ancient chain bolt and looked down the hallway, ready to voice her indignation at the disturbance. To Helene's astonishment, the carpenters were gone, and had taken their tools and work with them. Where Helene had expected to see some sort of a ladder standing 13 steps high, there was only the dim, empty passageway, without a sign of anyone in either direction. The floor at least should have shown traces of sawdust, but there was none there. Still puzzled, Helene went back to bed, but her sleep was fitful. In brief dreams, she seemed to hear echoes of that same sawing, hammering, and shouting until she finally awoke and saw that it was broad daylight. The twitter of birds had become incessant from the high branches of the trees, and Helene's wristwatch showed the time as 10:30. She dressed and went downstairs. She passed through the great banquet hall, which was singularly subdued in contrast to last night, and came into a cozy yet roomy breakfast room. Beneath a Gothic window, with stained glass shields of the boy's forebears, a dozen guests were helping themselves to kippers, kidneys, eggs, and muffins from a buffet table. Cynthia was in the group, and she exchanged smiles with Helene as they passed. Armed with a breakfast tray, Helene sat down at a circular table set in a large curved window. There, James Boyce was chatting with Cyril Moorcroft and Gordon Woodrow as they looked out across the moat to the rolling lawns and distant trees. Boyce had shaken off his morbid mood of the night before. In the sunlight, his face shone a ruddy gleam, and his smile was genuine. Perhaps his relief over the coming disposal of Seven Towers was making him forget the past. Boyce seemed ready for a joke when Paul Corley joined the group. "Well, shall we start lying now about things that happened to us last night?" he asked. "Or shall we wait until the rest of the crowd comes shrieking down from upstairs with ghosts snapping at their heels?" Let's tell our own adventures first," suggested Helene, "so we will be conditioned for something really gruesome. Then we can go rouse the others and find out how many are dead in their beds." "There's nothing really weird about Seven Towers," Boyce said, as though anxious to convince himself. "My ancestors thought they saw ghosts because they spent long winter evenings beside the flickering firelight with nothing better than a feeble candle flame to hunt for imaginary creatures in the shadows." But what about people hearing things?" demanded Helene. "How do you explain that?" "All the more easily," returned Boyce, with a broad smile. "In the dark, all sorts of trifling sounds are magnified. I don't mean in the dark, I mean in the daylight. Early this morning, when you were half asleep or probably dreaming. When I was wide awake, as I am now," Helene Helene was emphatic. "I've always had the same room here at Seven Towers, and the first time it gave me a bit of the creeps, but I soon got over that. Today, however," Helene stopped and turned to Corley. "You weren't staging one of your hoaxes, were you, Paul?" Corley shook his head, and Helene went on. "No, it couldn't have been a hoax, nor a ghost." She faced Boyce again, and added, "It was your carpenters, I heard. But why so early in the morning?" Despite the glow of the sunlight, Boyce's face was drained white. His voice shook. "What carpenters? Why don't you have carpenters regularly repair the castle?" "I haven't had one here for the past 2 weeks." Then they must have come on their own," claimed Helene. "They were sawing and hammering outside my door, building steps, of all things. I even heard them counting them there were 13 in all." Helene gave a nod of recollection. "And they were making them for someone called Old Beardy." Boyce's face was sheet white now. The sunlight accentuated its utter pallor. His coffee cup rattled in its saucer as he lowered both to the table. Helene saw the effect the old name had. Old Beardy had produced, and she wished she hadn't uttered it. What made it worse, Cynthia arrived in the unfortunate moment and happened to overhear her friend's words. "Old Beardy?" echoed Cynthia. "What a quaint name. Why, it sounds like the caretaker or whoever he was I met outside my room last night. He had a white beard and long hair." Boyce's hollow tone came in sudden interruption. "This bearded man came from the far end of the passage?" "That's right," Cynthia agreed, "and I saw him very clearly. I even noticed the odd uniform there in the light. But there is no light in that passage." Boyce's slow words carried a note of utter desperation, like the toll of a death knell. Cynthia's recollection became a stark horror. "But I saw him so clearly. He must have been carrying a light. But no, he wasn't. The glow just moved along with him." Cynthia choked, panicky, and blurted, "I must have been seeing a ghost." "A ghost!" The double echo came from Janice Petersham and Della Weldon, who were just now joining the group, and Della exclaimed, "Why, we saw that bearded man too." Without a word, the master of Seven Towers turned and stalked quickly through the banquet hall. The rest The rest sat in stunned silence until they heard the slam of a door. Then Moorcroft exclaimed, "We must stop him." Some of the group hurried after Boyce, while others found a way out through the old sallyport, leading to a rustic bridge that crossed a corner of the moat. But before they could overtake Boyce, his red convertible roared out beneath the raised portcullis and across the old drawbridge. Crouched like a racing driver, Boyce sped his car, shrieking around the turns until its red streak was swallowed by the green mass of the deer park. On the lawn, the guests congregated about Cyril Moorcroft, asking if he knew where Boyce had gone and why he had left so hurriedly. "He's probably gone to Yarwick," stated Moorcroft, "to see his solicitor and make sure that the castle deed had been transferred." "From the way he was driving," observed Corley, "he'll be lucky to get that far. You'd have thought the devil was after him." "Perhaps he was," returned Moorcroft dryly. "In the lore of Seven Towers, there is not much choice between the devil and Old Beardy." That brought startled looks from Cynthia and the others who had seen the glowing bearded figure the night before. Moorcroft suggested that they adjourn to the castle library, where he would explain the situation fully, so a quarter of an hour later, all were assembled in the alcoved room. "Till now," asserted Moorcroft, "I was not free to discuss the curse of Seven Towers. My purpose here was to track down old superstitions and debunk them. But now that the ghosts have actually walked and certain portents have been manifested, explanations are in order. The curse dates back to the 15th century, toward the end of the Wars of the Roses. Sir Reginald Dubois, who had been rebuilding Seven Towers, openly favored the House of York, but secretly sided with the House of Lancaster. Among the Lancastrians who knew this was Sir Cedric Shapley, who had once been engaged in a bitter feud with Sir Reginald Dubois. After a battle that was against the Lancaster forces, it was said that Sir Cedric and the remnant of his bodyguard fled for refuge to Seven Towers, trusting that Sir Reginald would hide them if the Yorkists searched the castle. Later, Sir Reginald claimed that they had never arrived there, and that they must have been ambushed on the way. The fact that stands is that Sir Cedric and his followers were never seen again. "And what," put in Woodrow, "did Sir Cedric's friends do about it?" "They did nothing, because they could prove nothing, but as time went by, suspicion centered on Sir Reginald due to reports of armored feet stamping through the halls of Seven Towers, presumably the ghost of Shapley's men." "Did Sir Reginald Dubois ever hear those footsteps himself?" "Definitely yes." Moorcroft thumbed the pages of a heavy-bound volume. "And so did his descendants in the years that followed, along with other persons like ourselves last night. But Sir Reginald may well have been a guilty conscience, for he was driven mad by those phantom footbeats. His enemies had sworn that they would capture and hang Old Beardy, as they contemptuously called Sir Reginald. They never did, but when he was on his deathbed, new sounds were heard about the castle, those of carpenters preparing the 13 steps of a gallows for Old Beardy." Helene Lowland stared aghast at the professor. "According to tradition," continued Moorcroft, "Sir Reginald, dying, passed on a guilty secret to the heir who succeeded him. Since then, the grim secret has been handed down to each new master of the castle. Whenever one is about to die, the ghost of Old Beardy himself stalks these halls, and the sound of carpenters building the gallows is heard as a threat of doom." "And what has been done?" asked Woodrow, "to end the family curse?" "Some persons have given up their inheritance to escape it," declared Moorcroft. "One branch of the family changed its name to Boyce, as we know, but that was little help. The first Boyce, who claimed Seven Towers as his rightful property, was given the secret and found that he had inherited the curse as well. Since then, it has been passed along in the customary way. What if something happens to the owner of the castle before he has a chance to pass along the secret?" Paul Corley asked. The curse itself has taken care of that, exclaimed Moorcroft. Whoever owns 7 towers has one advantage, or should I say disadvantage. He knows in advance when his time is up, so he can plan accordingly. The ghost of old Beardy and phantom carpenters who build their invisible scaffold see that he receives due notice. And Jimmy Boy receiving his notice this morning, observed Corley. From the way he was driving, he's likely to miss that sharp turn at the Yarwick River. If he does, he will never pass the secret along. He wants it to die with him, declared Moorcroft calmly. So far as records show, he is the last of the Boyce line. That is why he planned to nationalize the castle and avoid the curse, but it has overtaken him. Gordon Woodrow gave a disdainful grunt and showed how little he believed in superstition or tradition. In a gruff tone, he demanded, "Just what is tangible about this curse? How is the castle even itself figure into the strange riddle?" Okay, just what is tangible about the curse? How is the castle itself supposed to figure in the strange riddle? There is supposed to be a secret chamber, explained Moorcroft, which holds the full answer, but I have studied all the records of the castle reconstruction and additions over a period of 500 years, and I can find no clue nor reference to its existence other than hearsay. But if it does exist, Jim Boyce must know about it. Yes, but he would have sworn not to tell anyone except a proper heir. Have people ever tried to find the hidden room? Yes, about a century ago, a group of guests went through the castle while the master was away. They hung a towel from each window they came to, intending to check them later from outside. Any window without a towel might have represented the secret room. But they didn't find it? No, the owner of the castle came back while they were still hanging out towels and ordered them all to leave. Slowly, Woodrow withdrew his hand along his rugged chin and gave a knowing nod to the other guests. "Do you know," he said, with a slight laugh, "that is not a bad idea. If Jimmy Boy, as you call him, is so afraid of the family curse, why not relieve him of his worry? We could work the towel trick ourselves before he gets back from Yarwick. Maybe we'll find the secret chamber." The plan swept the group like wildfire, but now all the rest of the guests had come downstairs, so there were 24 willing workers. Woodrow formed them into squads, which he assigned to different sections of the castle. In the empty guardroom, Corley found keys with tags bearing the names of the doors they unlocked. These were sorted and distributed among the proper squads. Some of the keys unlocked linen closets, where sheets and pillow slips were available along with towels. This was truly an all-out effort to crack the riddle of 7 towers, but it proved to be a formidable task indeed. There were actually a few hundred rooms in the vast expanse of the castle, counting all the side nooks and dead-end hallways. These, in turn, had from 1 to a dozen windows each, depending on their size, so the squads had a long way to go. Woodrow decided to go to the top of the Norman keep himself, hanging towels from the archers' slits along the way. Helene brought along a reserve supply, and when they emerged through the trapdoor to the open roof and its surrounding parapet, Woodrow decided to take some pictures with a camera he carried. While he was thus engaged, Moorcroft joined them, smiling as though the climb meant nothing. The professor was surprisingly agile. The parapet around the tower was topped with stone posts or merlons. These narrow intervening spaces, called crenelles, through which ancient archers had shot arrows from their crossbows. As Woodrow leaned against one of the merlons to focus his camera on the distant landscape, part of the stone post gave away. Helene cried out a warning as the rangy Australian caught himself. Then, daringly, Woodrow leaned across the widened embrasure to watch the falling chunk splash into the moat far below. It must be deep, that moat," remarked Woodrow casually. "Muddy, too, with quite a current." "It comes from the river," explained Moorcroft. The old records tell how they cut a special channel to supply it. Yes, I can see the course now. Woodrow was leaning against another merlon to look down. Moorcroft tugged him back, and just in time, as another loose stone went plunging to the muddy depths. Thanks, said Woodrow, as though having his life saved was a regular occurrence. I must say there is a fine view from here. Since this is the highest tower, returned Moorcroft, it should give us a fine view. You might find it still finer looking up from the moat. A good touch, Professor, chuckled Woodrow. But don't worry about me. I've walked ledges 1,000 feet up, and I'm as sure-footed as a cat. Well, I can't waste time taking pictures now. I must get down and see how the search is getting along. He paused and then suggested, why don't you two stay up here and watch for that red car of Boyce's? Moorcroft and Helene decided that would be a good idea. To Helene, the next hour proved fascinating indeed, for Moorcroft was steeped in the history of the region. The professor pointed out the remnants of forests where outlaws had roamed. He traced the course of the river through a distant battlefield and indicated a hill where ancient druids had held their pagan rituals. So engrossed was Helene that neither she nor Moorcroft noted the approach of Boyce's car until they saw it tearing through the entrance to the deer park. Frantically, Helene raced down the tower steps, Moorcroft following as she flew through the gloomy corridors of the floors below. She forgot that these were ghostly haunts as she shouted for everyone to hang out the last towels in a hurry. As Boyce was coming back, Helene reached the front lawn before Boyce's car arrived, and looking up she saw an intriguing sight. Where was it? Towels, sheets, and curtains were dangling from every window, not only from the castle front, but from the side walls as well, as far as Helene could see. Wherever battlements rose above the inner court, the telltale markers showed there too. Woodrow's squads had done a thorough job, and even now some of the guests were surging from the castle gates to take an admiring look at their handiwork. One person who did not admire the sight was James Boyce. His car came streaking through the front of the deer park and shrieked to a halt before it reached the drawbridge. Boyce sprang out, his face red with rage. To him, these claws were hostile banners that flouted his authority. Boyce waved to a few gardeners who so far had paid no attention to the goings-on within the castle. He shouted for them to get upstairs and snatch the telltale markers from the windows. Next, he summoned the few servants who were in their quarters and ordered them to do the same. While the flaunting banners gradually disappeared, Boyce came storming from his castle to berate the somewhat sheepish guests now clustered on the lawn. Helene noted that Woodrow was not among them. It wouldn't have mattered because Boyce promptly singled out Corley as the ringleader. "This is one joke of yours that has gone too far," Boyce fairly screamed. "I never should have invited you here. Now you can get out, and stay out, and take this whole motley mob of ingrates with you." Righto, Jimmy boy," returned Corley blandly. He turned to the silent guest. "We'd better all get out before the High Constable shows up and tags our cars for parking in the castle courtyard." As one car after another left, Boyce stood with folded arms and watched them go. The only man who remained was Cyril Moorcroft, who gestured for both Helene Lowland and her friend Cynthia Gifford to stay. "Too bad this had to happen," Moorcroft said soberly, "but when James Boyce gets over his anger, he will be looking for someone who can help settle the ghost question, which you two can. You, for one," he spoke directly to Cynthia, "saw old Beardy, and you," he turned to Helene, "heard the phantom carpenters. And I," the man's voice said from close behind them, "helped track the tramping ghosts. Don't you think I should be welcome too?" It was Gordon Woodrow, more poised than ever. His smile was broad and hard, showing that he was ready to challenge anyone who might object. Now that Corley had taken the blame for flaunting the towels from the castle window, Boyce had no reason to suspect Woodrow had been the instigator. After glancing up at the castle, where by now at least half the improvised banners had been withdrawn from the windows, Boyce returned to the few persons who remained. "Now," he said, "I'm at least with people I can trust. Let's go inside and talk this over." They went into the library when the whole mad caper had begun, and Helene felt hypocritical indeed. She was beginning to wonder just who could be trusted in this mood. She told Boyce, "Look, Jimmy, since the rest of us have left, oh no, sorry. Look, Jimmy, since the rest have left, Cynthia and I are going too, as soon as we can order a car to take us up to London. I have to call my solicitor's office in Yarwick, declared Boyce, so I'll have him order a car from there." Boyce went to the phone. While he was gone, Helene turned to Woodrow with an accusing glare and demanded, "Where were you while everyone was being ordered to get out?" "Making the rounds," responded Woodrow calmly, taking pictures of the castle from every angle. He brought some rolls of film from his pocket and handed them to Moorcroft. "Have these developed," continued Woodrow, "and add them to the archives of Seven Towers. They will definitely prove what I am sure I saw while I was taking pictures." We're going to stop this here. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe. Oh wait, we've been reading from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter P. Gibson. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.